What's up? I'm Dan Random, and today I'm changing the motor mounts on this 2002 Honda Accord 3.0 V6. So I started by removing the 17mm nuts on both front and rear motor mount, and then I removed all 4 bolts that hold the motor mount to the subframe. Now this is what the motor mounts look like, and they are the vacuum type. So as you can see, I have all the bolts out of the bottom of the front and rear mounts, and these are the 17mm nuts from up here, and then these nuts here come out from this cross member under here. There are 4 holes. Here's one transmission mount, and here's the other transmission mount. And to get these out, I used a lot of extensions, swivels. Now I have a lot, so I didn't need to reuse some to do other things. But yeah, you definitely need to reach down far and use a big bar, most likely to break a lot of them loose. So the reason I took all of those nuts and bolts out first is because now I can take a jack underneath the transmission and carefully jack up the transmission and motor slightly and take out both the front and rear motor mounts and unbolt the transmission mounts, and they should all just be able to be swapped very quickly then. And then I can put my nuts and bolts back in, and that should be it. So I was hoping to be able to jack up the motor and transmission high enough to be able to just pop these things out, but it looks like I do have to take off these brackets. But with this jacked up, I can spin this around and you can get easier access to the bolts back here. So I do suggest jacking this up in order to get these brackets out. So I took 2 bolts out of the bracket, and I still have the third one, the harder one to get to, which you can more easily get to from underneath. And I don't know if you can see, but right there I have a ratcheting wrench hanging off the third bolt. So I broke it loose and I was about to take it out, and then I realized if I rotate everything sideways, I can just take it out and then put the new one in and rotate everything back into place without totally removing that third bolt. So hopefully I can do that on the rear one as well. So let me get this one up out of here, and then we of course also have to unplug the vacuum line on the bottom here. So I'll probably have to get a pair of needle nose pliers to carefully pop that off. So here's the old front motor mount. I was able to get the vacuum line off with a tiny little squirt of WD-40 and carefully wiggling the hose with needle nose pliers. So this car also has the check engine light on for random misfires, and there doesn't seem to be anything that I can find wrong with the car except possibly a vacuum leak, and I actually think it's coming from here. Now, as you can see, this moves around very easily. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but I think it's not attached inside. These do not wiggle around when you do that. This feels extremely firm. There's nothing about this that wiggles at all. So I have a feeling that, yeah, look at that. So I think that this is detached inside and causing a vacuum leak, which is triggering my computer to throw a random misfire code. And of course the car doesn't get the best fuel economy either with that happening. So hopefully this resolves both the motor mount, engine jerking issue, and hopefully it also turns off the check engine light. Alright, so it looks like this one is the one that needs to go back in place. So I'm going to plug the vacuum line back in and slip it back into place. As you can see, the transmission mounts popped out of their spots, but this one was actually broken. So I'm just going to remove the bottom part here, and then I can take the 2 14mm bolts out up here. If it's broken, it'll actually give you more access, so I'm glad that it's broken. And then I just need to remove this, and there's another 14 I think somewhere on this, but this one is not broken. Is it up here? So there is the rear transmission mount replaced. I'm actually going to hang it with the bolts and put it up place so that when I drop the motor and transmission, the studs fall through. So it's just sitting here. I'm going to bolt it up top. And this one here, it is actually really split. So I'm going to see if I can maybe just break it, because this is what it looks like. So I guess there's a bolt on the back side and the bolt that you can see right here. So I'm going to take this one out, and I'll probably have to just go underneath and get the other one out from the back side. So both bolts are actually on this side. This one's here and the other one is right back here. So they're both facing this way. This one might be a little bit harder to get to, but yeah, you can get something in there. That one came out easier than I thought. I was actually able to get an extension on my gun here and actually get to both of them. All right, so I have these two back in place, and they should just go right down in their holes when I lower everything down in the end. So now I have to get to the rear motor mount, which seems like it's the trickiest. So the bracket on this rear motor mount is larger than the one on the front, and you can get to one bolt up top here. It's well, it's basically on the motor, on the motor side of the motor mount, and the other two you can access from underneath, and it's not as bad as it seems actually. So there ended up being a fourth bolt on the rear bracket, and you pretty much do have to take the rear bracket out. I mean, not totally out, you can set it aside up under the car, but here's the old one now, and here's the new one. So this one is definitely shot too. Not as bad as the front one, but so I'm going to slip this one back into place and get the vacuum line on. So now with all the nuts and bolts back in, I dropped the motor down, and the nuts that go in the cross member, they can be a bit of a pain if you don't have a power ratchet or something that can sort of spin the nuts while you're trying to find exactly which angle the studs are going through the hole. It's not usually perfectly straight, so that can be kind of a pain with manual tools. And the transmission mounts, as I was lowering it, they kind of didn't go directly into the holes, so I had to get them really close, or pretty much touching the metal, and then with a big strong screwdriver I pushed them into place and then lowered it more, and they went in the holes at that point. So all in all, this job is somewhat time consuming. It takes a few hours, but it's really not that bad. And when you run into a difficult nut or bolt that seems like you won't be able to get to it or crack it loose, just take a little break. It's really actually not as bad as it seems. So to do the passenger side motor mount, you just have to take two 10mm bolts out and disconnect this electrical connector and lift this whole thing up out of the way. Then you have access to your 14mm bolt down here. But first, if you have this thing in the way on yours, this ballast, you can take this 17mm bolt out of here and get rid of this ballast so that you can get this 14mm bolt on the bottom. And there are two up here for this bracket, and then we have one more 14mm bolt down here. Not sure if you can see it, but I'm pretty much pointing at it. So go ahead and remove these two bolts in this bracket here. They're 14mm. You can get them with an extension. That makes this nice and loose so that this comes out easily. And now with that out of the way, I can get to that bottom 14mm bolt, and then I can take the whole entire thing out. And this way I can take everything out and I can put it back together, putting these bolts in last, and I can suck the motor back into place with them carefully instead of jacking up the motor. So here's the motor mount out, and it looks like it's actually pretty much brand new. There's no cracks or anything if you remove this. So I'm just going to put it back. The only reason I bought another one was because I bought the whole kit, which included everything, and that was the cheapest price. I believe I actually replaced this a year ago when I did the water pump and timing belt job, so I'm just going to put this right back in place. Alright, I put the mount back in first, then I put this bolt back through, but I didn't tighten it all the way. Then I put these bolts in this bracket here, and then I finished tightening this, and then put this back in place. Don't forget the electrical connector. And I still have to, the heat controls, I have to mount them back to the firewall. I had to pop that out of the way to get to the rear motor mount. So that's how you change the motor and transmission mount on a 3.0 liter Honda Accord V6.